have a super exciting guest. We got Troy Walsh with Drone Media Chicago. Thank you for coming on the show, Troy.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, cool story. We met Troy probably back in, was it 2019? We were filming a festival in Chicago right off Dorley Island. And Troy was our drone guy with another good friend of ours, Marcel. And they came out and did some drone shots of pretty much the skyline of the festival. And then after kind of years have passed, I've been following Troy. And man, he does a lot more than just music festival stuff. Troy, you've done stuff with clients like what? Facebook, Nike, I saw Paramount, Disney, I mean, National Geographic. That's amazing and inspiring. So I would love to just kind of start and hear your background and how you got into flying drones.
Yeah, first, what are music festivals? Oh, wait, those are coming back, I think, this year. So it's been a minute, but yeah, man, thanks again for having me on here. And yeah, I think the first time that you and me met, we had a pretty good time and had a lot of fun. So hopefully we can do that again in the future. Yeah, I mean, a little background on me. I own a production company, Drone Media Chicago. We specialize in aerial video and photography primarily. We do a little bit of traditional production as well, but that's kind of our bread and butter. Started, 2014-ish, maybe a little bit earlier. Just honestly, it's kind of a hobby. At the time, you can go out and build like a kit drone. I grew up flying remote control airplanes and helicopters, so that's really cool. And I think it was about that time, 2013, where you can go out and buy like a kit from your local hobby store and build a drone or a quadcopter is what we called them at the time. And then just kind of from there, started throwing GoPros on them. And again, just a hobby that kind of turned into a career and an industry now. So,
Love that. I think the best passions start, when you're just kind of having fun, kind of the hobbyist turned professional, I call it, where, even for us, that's kind of what it was. You picked up a camera. I think a Rebel was our first camera, T3i Rebel, and then it just kind of evolves. You get curious about more gear. I'd love to hear so people listening, Troy does video. He also does drone video. And this new industry that kind of came up, I feel like, is the whole FPV drones, right? Can you kind of talk about, for people that maybe don't know what an FPV drone is and kind of how it is so popular now?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. First person view, what FPV stands for, is not a new concept by any means. It actually is kind of one of the first ways that, I was using drones professionally, was through an analog first person view signal. And a lot of people that were starting out, that was kind of, for the do-it-yourself community was a thing. Over time, and especially now, the analog has been replaced with high definition video transmission systems. So they're getting smaller and they're getting more reliable for, I think, filmmakers to use and to implement into a different type of workflow for how we capture aerial cinematography. So, the idea of FPV, that first person view of flying, has been around for a long time, mostly in kind of the hobby and do-it-yourself community, not really the professional cinema industry, but we're seeing a bridge now and a gap with that, which is, in my mind, amazing, because it's kind of reinventing the way that we look at and view aerial video or aerial cinematography. The big kind of advancement a few years ago was putting a gimbal on a drone and getting very stabilized, crisp, dolly-like shots, which certainly has its place and certainly provides a certain look and feel. With the whole FPV, I guess movement, I guess you want to call it, you can do things with cameras now that you can't do with traditional platforms, and that's, I think, kind of reigniting and sparking, kind of what I think has been kind of a stagnant industry for aerial video for the past couple of years. I mean, yeah, you can always put a better camera on a drone, but kind of the way that drone or that camera moved throughout space, it's kind of been stagnant in the past couple of years. Now we're seeing with FPV, you can move that camera throughout space in a whole different way, and it's making things more exciting.
Oh yeah, I mean, firsthand, just seeing some of the stuff you've posted in Chicago, going down skyscrapers. I mean, it's stomach dropping. I mean, I'm like, oh, I'm not afraid of heights, and then I see one of your videos, and I see that perspective of like, this is a whole different element of drone stuff. I have more of the standard hobbyists. We have a Mavic Pro in house, and we're kind of like, if a client's like, hey, can you guys do drone stuff? We're like, yeah, we could pop it up. But then, you meet people like yourself where you have access to Altas and Inspires and Mavics and FPV. So I guess my question for you is like, when the client reaches out, like, how do you go about deciding which drone is the best for your project?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like on your initial discovery call or email, whatever, that that always comes up, because you want to execute on the client's vision as best as you can. So they have certain expectations, they have certain requirements that they need, depending on a number of different things. Is it a corporate client? Is it a larger commercial project? Is it a feature? I mean, that kind of all depends on kind of where you might guide them for the best tool for the job. And a lot of times they might know, and a lot of times they don't. So it's really about asking questions and figuring out, okay, at the end of the day, what's the intended purpose? Like, where's the project going to live? Is it just for web? Is it going to be used on like a spot to go to television? So it really kind of all depends on what the client's expectations and needs are, and then you can kind of guide them to what you feel would be the best tool, and the budget.
Right. We can't leave that out, right? That's probably the kicker out. No, I love that. I think I agree with you. I think it's all relative, and like even our video world, right? It's like there's expectations, and then there's kind of like, okay, well, this is what's needed to get that vision done. But what I feel like I'm starting to see with the OFPV, like the movement, like you call it, is I feel like at first it was like very kind of like, here's just this really cool video going through city or going through a canyon, right? But now I feel like I've started to see them a lot in like a commercial aspect. And I know you did some stuff recently with the Packers, right? Where you kind of were at a stadium. Can you maybe talk about like, I mean, how does it feel like throwing the FPV view like in a commercial space? Do you feel like there is that open creativity for this?
100%. And I think the reason being, for FPV, there's a trade-off for it in a traditional sense, where especially for some of these, like, let's talk about the elephant in the room, that bowling video that went viral. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That was that was really neat. I mean, there's a lot that went into that to make it what it was, and the outcome, obviously was very well received. And you have, I was like seemed like every like 3 hours somebody was sending me a link. Have you seen this? I haven't.
I think I tagged you in it, right, too?
No, it's totally cool. But it excited me because, it's taking aerial cinematography, aerial video, whatever you want to call it, and refreshing it and giving it a whole new spin. And the I think the interesting to take away from that too is, you know, nobody, you know, the camera that they shot that on, I think it was maybe a Hero 8, Hero 9, don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you know, it wasn't a Red, you know, it wasn't, you know, super high end cinema camera. And it doesn't matter. The value that that provided in that perspective, you know, outweighed what, you know, anybody's going to get down to a nitty gritty and like pixel peep on like, oh, this, you know,
Yeah.
the white balance was a little off here, or this is a little grainy, or, you know, it doesn't matter. Like whoever was watching it just said, oh my gosh, they started outside a bowling alley and flew through the entire, you know, thing, ending up in the gutter at the end. And
Right.
that's the value add, and that's the exciting thing, because you can put these smaller decased Hero cameras in something like, you know, the size of this drone and
Wow.
fly this through, you know, the opening the size of my hand, and whoever's watching it's going to say, oh my gosh, how did they do that? They're not going to
Right.
say, oh my gosh, like maybe that wasn't the most crisp video they've ever seen, like, you know, but that's not the point, and that's not really, you know, what makes it so interesting. You know, so I guess where I was going with that whole thing, and in some of these kind of unique one take shots, is and again, it kind of refreshes what you can do with a flying camera. And I think now, after so many people have seen that video and see the possibilities, it's going to open a lot more creative outlets to use, you know, these smaller cine drones as a tool for a lot of
Right.
creative stuff.
Right. I mean, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I feel like it's like FPV drone is like almost like clipping your wings, like taking the weight off your back, just letting your mind kind of be free. I see like the headsets, and it's almost just like, um, yeah, let's see what it looks like. I mean, can you kind of like, can you, my brother, we were kind of going back and forth, and he's like, you know, with the FPV drones, you become the bird. You know, you become the bird in the sky. Can you kind of walk us through just the process of flying one of these FPV drones?
Oh yeah,
How,
you definitely leave the ground, planet Earth, and you are up there when you are in these things. It's a it's an obviously a very immersive experience. And people, you know, a lot of people try to compare it to like virtual reality or something like that, and like I can kind of see that. The thing with the thing with flying FPV though, when you're wearing those goggles, which is very different than I would say like wearing like an Oculus or like playing a video in 3D, and it's one thing that I think really separates it. There's consequences to what you do when you're wearing those. It's not like you can crash into a wall and hit reset on like a video game or a simulator. I mean, depending on what you're flying, you know, there's real consequences. So it really feels real when you're experiencing filming an FPV, and that's the biggest thing that I think a lot
wow.
of people will say, because you know you are essentially in the camera. If you crash your drone or it flies away, or you hit a building or you hit talent, like that's all real stuff. So it's a very real feeling when you're flying, and I've never really experienced anything quite like it for that
Yeah.
reason.
Wow. I mean, no, I would imagine, especially with like kind of a new wave of filmmakers, everyone trying to hop on like the newest thing. I feel like you, like, you know, you've had that expert experience. You've flown Altas and Spires where you really understand how drones work, and your license, and kind of you have that background. Do you have, like, are there any challenges you could speak on? Not like so much crashing, but just like things that you've had to encounter with people, or when you are flying, or buildings?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, from a challenge from a business perspective, again, I think is just kind of like this aerial cinematography. I think aerial cinematography will always have its place. I feel like though in the past couple of years, it's kind of again it gotten stagnant. You know, we're accustomed to it, we see it. It's kind of lost its kind of I guess wow factor or cool factor. And don't get me wrong, like I still I'll still see some shots and I'll see some views from a drone that you can't really get any other way. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. But it's kind of I don't know, I kind of got tired a little bit. But
Mhm.
again, I think now with FPV, um, it's again kind of revamping and
Yeah.
re-energizing how you can move cameras in space.
Right.
So I would say that was a challenge. Just what do we do next here? Again, you can always put a better camera on something. You can always get a new lens or shoot a higher you know resolution, but that only gets you so far, and that doesn't add to the creative aspect of it. That just is another spec to throw out there. So um so
Right.
the industry kind of getting stagnant was a big thing. In terms of other challenges, I mean, I run a business just like anybody else,
Right.
no different. Still hate doing my own, a lot of stuff that I do, accounting work
Day
and
to day.
day-to-day operations, taking out the recycling at the office,
Ah,
but
right. We wish we could always be shooting all day, right? It's kind of like when you're in your zone. For so I'm curious, like for the people listening, someone who's looking to get into FPV drones, can you give them some advice, kind of maybe to guide them in a direction or anything that you kind of taken away?
yeah. And that's tough too. That's a tough one too, because again, it is a very unique and specific piece of equipment to use. You're not going to go and fly your FPV drone like you would like somebody who's maybe coming from like a Mavic or Phantom or whatever that world. It's a completely different tool for a completely different um, type of filming. Um, you know, for forever it's been a do-it-yourself community. You buy the frame, you buy the ESCs, you buy the flight controller, you buy the motors, you solder it all together. Then once you think you've soldered all the wires right where they go and you plug it in and it doesn't smoke, then you got to go in through you know a, uh, a user interface like Betaflight or Emu Flight, and then program the drone uh, to your radio, PID tunings, making sure you're on the right protocol. There's a lot of different things that go into it. Um, and I honestly don't think that's a bad route to go for people looking to get into FPV. Because here's the thing, I'll grab it.
Yeah. Show us what you got.
And I'm back. Okay. Should have really cleaned my desk a little bit more. I didn't think I was going to be grabbing all this stuff. I
All
guess it's kind
good.
of show and tell a little bit.
That's
So
right.
everybody probably knows what this drone is. Most
Right.
people do that come from maybe the Mavic world or professional world. And this is the DJI FPV drone. I
The new
mean,
one. That one just
the
came
new
out,
one.
right? Right.
hmm It's like a flying potato. It's big. It's heavy. It's got sensors,
Wow.
obstacle avoidance. Um, which is great for a number of different reasons. It also has some of its disadvantages. I guess start with the advantages. It'll fly very similar to a Mavic drone or your typical DJI drone that most people are accustomed to. What I mean by that is you put it up in the air, it'll use GPS and it'll hold its position. It'll do everything that a Mavic would, I guess. When you're ready, you're comfortable, you could throw it into full acro or manual control, and you can have no limitations in terms of what you want this drone to do.
Wow.
So you want to go and track a motorcycle down the road and do a split S turn and come back the other way and track another object. You can do that with an FPV drone. You can't do with a Mavic or Inspire.
Right.
So it's got a lot of things that will, I think, help people who have never done FPV or don't want to get into soldering, programming, doing all the things that go into something like this, a 5-inch drone, where you do build yourself, you do program yourself, you know it in and out, you know all the components. If something breaks, you can fix it, you know how to solder it. But that's not everybody.
Right.
So a lot of people are looking towards this. The major drawback of something like this, if you crash this,
It's done.
there's a good chance that it's not going to survive, and you're either sending it back to DJI, or you might be able to get parts now. But I mean, there's a lot more of an investment that goes into something like this, and when it goes wrong, it can go really wrong.
Right.
So if somebody wants to learn on something like this to do really cool moves like diving gaps or close proximity flights, I mean, just know that there's a big risk associated with this because it's expensive. And, if you're going to go, try something for the first time and try to excel at it, something at this price point that's not as durable as this might not be the best idea.
Makes sense. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that point of like that. I mean, that looks heavy to me. I mean, that like seeing your little like that to me looks like just a bigger, like an evolved Mavic. It really doesn't feel like an FPV drone to me just from seeing what the other ones look like in the Cine Whoops. Like, I can't even believe that it has the capabilities of that.
Well, here's the thing too, and why a lot of people who have flown FPV 5-inch and build them don't like this, and I can totally understand. It's because there's a lot of things. There's a lot of extra baggage you're carrying around that you don't need. I mean, if you're been flying FPV a while, you don't want obstacle avoidance. You don't want sensors. I mean, it's just extra baggage that you don't need, which, and as a result, makes this thing not fly as agile. It doesn't have as much power and precision as something like a 5-inch, where everything that's in this is made specifically to do what this needs to do, and that's to fly like a freestyle quad. Doesn't have a bunch of sensors, doesn't have a gimbal, it doesn't have all the extra weight and maybe things you don't need to go into this. So it's a very interesting market that it attracts. So I don't know. It's kind of a toss up between, should you just go out and buy this?
Right.
What does that even come out to, if you don't mind me asking? Do you know the price for that?
The like this ready to go with the battery, I think like $1,300 maybe.
Gotcha. Right.
Putting that right in the sky, just hope you don't crash, because again, it's like taking that drone out versus a Mavic. It's like a Mavic, you're going to be a little more reserved because the capabilities, where you're like, hey, this is an FPV drone, so I could do more. I mean, I think personally, I think convenience is there, but it's also like, it's like the person that builds their computer and the person that kind of like buys a loaded spec'd out computer, right? Do you feel like the Cine Whoop drones, you can kind of customize the specs or add bigger batteries, kind of?
Yeah, so I would say there's two different categories of FPV right now. One is the Cine Whoop style, which has the ducted fans around them, and that helps for two things. One, it makes the thrust more efficient because you're sucking in the air through these ducts and pushing them out. And I'm not an aerospace engineer, but it provides some more efficiency. And then also, let's say you're doing like an indoor shoot somewhere, and you need to get close to like like a car, or like at the like I was at a museum flying and you don't want to crash this. This can bounce off something and keep flying. And it's like
Wow.
it never touched you. If you try to do something like that with like this, or like a 5-inch, like you're gonna cause damage to people or property. So,
Wow.
but at the same time, I'm not gonna go use this to, you know, go track a car at 80 miles an hour,
Right.
or, you know, dive down the side of a mountain. I mean, they're two very different purpose built drones,
Right.
or types of drones. So, it's interesting.
No, I love that. I think it's kind of like, you know, relative to almost like why you use specific lenses in the standard video sense and why you use different cameras. I think in this video industry, it's really just like knowing your tools. Like, okay, it would make more sense to use something like an Inspire for this bigger stuff, and then for an FPV. Do you need a spotter when you do FPV? I know I always see you on Instagram kind of like with people. I know you like go out and shoot with people. Are those other friends that are just filming with you, or are they actually there kind of spotting you?
Yeah, I mean, you should have a spotter. I don't want to provide any like legal,
Disclaimer.
yeah, legal advice, like what you should or shouldn't do. It is good to have somebody else with you, though. Again, because, well, number one, it's always more fun to fly with more than one people, and especially if I mean, you can do it on analog too, but with the DJI system now, you can be a spectator. So,
Oh, no way.
yeah, like I was out with a friend yesterday, and you know, he was flying, he was wearing the goggles, and I was wearing them as well. So he's, you know,
That's crazy. I didn't know you could do
yeah,
that.
yeah. So you can, you know, go on a ride with somebody and just kind of
I love
experience what
that.
they do. But yeah, I mean, definitely, especially I would say like in the city environment here,
Right.
like maybe not so much like in a more urban environment if you're on like a couple acres in your farm and you're just flying like around where there's nothing there. But I mean, it's good to have two eyes on, you know, and at all times, especially like in Chicago.
I bet. I love that, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate it. I feel like I kind of covered a lot. I mean, I feel like I learned a lot from the FPV drones. I really appreciate you sharing. Um, so for people listening, I'd love Troy. I'd love for you to kind of share how they can reach you, find your company.
Yeah. Drone Media Chicago. I just Google it. or if you really want to get, you know, technical, www.dronemediachicago.com. You know, same on Facebook, just Drone Media Chicago. And then on Instagram, drone, like an underscore media underscore Chicago. And yeah, post kind of post what we're doing pretty frequently on social media, and then also, you know, just post some cool shots as well.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. I really appreciate you being on, everyone. I highly encourage check out Troy's work, Drone Media Chicago. He's posting stomach dropping clips, and just he's always out there shooting and around the city.
My stomach drops too when I do that. So
I mean, I would love to spectate one day with you. That'd be a cool little time.
anytime, man. I got another pair of goggles with your name on it, so let's do it.